Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to react to the 2021 winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. I am pretty specifically going to be talking about fiction, although I will talk about the winners in two other categories, specifically young people's literature and nonfiction, because I thought the winners in both of those categories sounded really interesting. But we'll get to those much later in this. I did not get a chance to film a reaction video last night when the winner was announced because, life. And they announced them at 5 p.m. my time. And I was on the phone, didn't get to watch the ceremony, and worked a little bit later. So it didn't happen. So I'm recording now in the morning my time, so you get to have coffee with me. How exciting is that for you? Because what are mornings without coffee? Now, let's get right into it. This was a bit of a surprise for me, although I feel like now that it's been announced, it shouldn't really be a surprise. The winner of the 2021 National Book Award for Fiction was Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. This, in my sort of prediction video that I did in a Friday Reads, which I will link in the description box down below, I talked about how this seemed like the dark horse. A lot of people who have commented on my videos about the National Book Award this year have loved this book. I think maybe one person was a little iffy on it, but it does feel like anybody who has read this book has loved it. It was possibly the least known of any of the finalists, and the National Book Award does like to reward sort of quirky books, but they also really like to reward lesser known authors, and Jason Mott really fit that bill. And I had kind of thought that maybe they would go with Laird for Zorrie instead if they wanted to elevate an relatively unknown author. But Laird is more known than Jason Mott, I believe. And so they went with the really unknown one. And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like Hell of a Book was a dark horse contender. And clearly it was. Clearly it won. In hindsight, it makes sense. I am sad for two of the finalists, the two that I read, but we'll talk about them in a little bit. It seems like this is a really good win just based on feedback that I've gotten from it. It sounds like a really interesting book. I am going to have to look for this from the library. I don't believe it's on Scribd or Libby. So I'm going to have to get on a hold list at my library and see what happens. If you are unfamiliar, let's take a look at the plot description on the National Book Award site. By the way, I will put a link to the whole ceremony, which is on the National Book Awards website, in the description box down below if you'd like to watch. It is a long ceremony, but you can skip to the parts that you like. That's what I did this morning. I skipped to the announcement of some of the awards. I didn't watch all of them, being honest, but I watched the young people's literature announcement, parts of the nonfiction, and definitely the fiction announcement. But let's do what they say about Hell of a Book on their website. With audacity and invention, Jason Mott's Hell of a Book weaves together three narrative strands: an unnamed author, a boy named Soot, and a figure known as the Kid, into a masterful novel. In a structurally and conceptually daring examination of art, fame, family, and being Black in America, Mott somehow manages the impossible trick of being playful, insightful, and deeply moving all at the same time. A highly original, inspired work that breaks new ground. I feel like, especially since Charles Yu won the National Book Award for Fiction last year for Interior Chinatown, if I had been thinking in that vein, it seems even more like Hell of a Book should have been a sure thing. But the thing is, the jury changes every year. There's a different chair this year. Charles Yu was actually one of the people who was on the panel to decide the winner. So tastes can change and fluctuate year by year. You can't really say, well, this one last year, so this is what will correlate best to that. It doesn't always work, but this year it does seem like there's a bit of a through line. Now, I did read Interior Chinatown and I did not end up liking it, but I feel like Interior Chinatown doesn't have the universal love that Hell of a Book has gotten so far. Maybe that will change now that more people are going to hopefully discover Hell of a Book through this award. But I feel like even before it won, Interior Chinatown was sort of swimming against the tide of sort of mixed response. Some people who were saying, like, I didn't get it, and some people who were saying, oh, I loved it. Hell of a Book seems much more universal. In terms of what it's about, just a quick blurb. In Jason Mott's Hell of a Book, a Black author sets out on a cross-country publicity tour to promote his best-selling novel. That storyline drives Hell of a Book and is the scaffolding of something much larger and urgent. since Mott's novel also tells the story of Soot, a young black boy living in a rural town in the recent past, and the kid, a possibly imaginary child, who appears to the author on his tour. As these stories build and converge, they astonish, for while this heartbreaking and magical book entertains and is at once about family, love of parents and children, art, and money, it is also about the nation's reckoning with a tragic police shooting playing over and over again on the news, and with what it can mean to be black in America. And that certainly seems like an unfortunately timely message. So again, it feels like I got emotionally involved in the two finalists that I had read, and maybe that means I was sleeping on Hell of a Book a little bit, but because it is one of those things where in hindsight it seems like, of course that book won, of course it did. Why did I think it was an underdog? I mean, it was because, like I said, Jason Mott is probably the least known author on the finalist list, and he was against two wildly best-selling books, one by a former winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So there was heavy competition. So let's talk about the other finalists just briefly. I mentioned that I was really rooting for two different books, and I couldn't decide which one. But now I'm going to try to read Hell of a Book. I don't know if I'll get to it this year. It depends on how long the hold list is at the library and bandwidth for the end of the year. So we'll see how that goes. But The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. was a finalist, and I really loved this book. I would have loved to have seen it won, but I think the finalists were strong enough that really any book could have won, and I wouldn't have been disappointed. This would have been a great winner, but Jason Mott gave a great speech. I really appreciated what he's had to say, and I think without having read it, it seems like Hell of a Book is a worthy winner as well. It feels like The Prophets hasn't gotten a lot of universal support. I personally loved it. I know a lot of other people who have loved it, but it does feel like there are some mixed responses out there. So I guess I can see where it wouldn't have won. I personally love it, and I think it's great. It would have been a worthy winner, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it got overlooked for the Booker Prize and a lot of other major awards this year. The Pulitzer is still out there. I would say it could be a contender for that. We'll have to wait and see. I feel like in terms of contenders for the Pulitzer Prize, obviously Hell of a Book has to go in there as well, but Zorrie by Laird Hunt feels like something that the Pulitzer would go for. They tend to like small, quiet books with a sort of elegant grace to them, and that is Zorrie to a T. I really loved this book as well. It would certainly fit in with some of the smaller, graceful Pulitzer winners like Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, Tinkers by Paul Herning. It could very well be a contender there, but we're months away from that decision, so I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. But I think this would have been another worthy winner. It seems like there are a lot of really great finalists for the National Book Award for Fiction this year that could have won maybe any other year. The two finalists that I have not read are Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, which has gotten a little bit of a mixed reaction. It seems like a bit of a quirky book, which, like I said, the National Book Award can go for, so it felt like it could have had an edge if the jury had been looking to reward a popular author, but that is not the direction they ended up going. But because it is quirky, it does feel like there have been people who have said it's the best thing they read this year, and there have been people who said it was a little weird. So I don't know where I fall on it. I am on a hold list for Cloud Cuckoo Land. I did decide to do that, but we'll see what happens. I don't know that I will get to it this year. It's probably going to be something I'll get to next year. And the other one was Lauren Groff's Matrix. This was the only finalist that was by a female author, which is not great. And when you look at the long list, there are some books by women that could have been contenders. I think it goes to show that this really has been a strong year for fiction. I don't think the National Book Award Foundation is an organization that overlooks women or minorities. I don't think that this is something that's likely to repeat, that they only have one female finalist who doesn't end up winning. But it will be interesting to follow. And I understand the concern about it, but given their history of celebration of diversity, I'm not very worried about it. This isn't like an Oscars so white type situation, at least not yet. We'll have to see what happens next year and moving forward. If it's trend that continues, it will be worrisome. But right now, I'm not I'm not overly bent out of shape about it. And again, that is not to dismiss the concerns that people have about the fact that only one woman made the shortlist for the National Book Award for Fiction this year. I just think, given the history of the National Book Foundation's celebration of diversity, it's not a problem yet. Something to watch for and monitor. But for all we know right now, it could be a blip. Anyway, I am very interested in reading Lauren Groff's Matrix. It sounds like a really good book. I've gotten some interesting and good feedback on it as well. I am on a hold list for that at the library. We'll see when it becomes available. That is another one that I am likely to get to next year, probably, based on when the hold will be available and what my reading life is going to look like over the next month as we close out 2021. Can you believe we're closing out 2021? That is wild. And looking at the long list that they produced for the National Book Award for Fiction this year, the one that jumps out the most as something that could have easily made the shortlist is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fanon Jeffers. That is a book that I think is going to be showing up in best of lists. We should be getting into best of lists right about now. The New York Times one will be coming at the end of the month. So I feel like that's a book we're going to be seeing pop up a lot, and it could have easily taken a spot in the finalists. The only one that I would point to and say maybe I would swap out is Cloud Cuckoo Land, just because I'm still iffy on whether or not I'm going to like that book or if I want to read that book. So sight unseen, haven't read either one of them. That is probably one that I would have swapped for a different book, not because it was written by a female writer, but because I've heard really great things about it. I'm really excited to read it, and that maybe would have balanced out the list of finalists a little bit better. Mostly, I just think it's great that we are having these conversations about diversity in writing and authors and representation. And I think in that regard, it is probably a good thing as well that Hell of a Book did end up winning. And I'm looking forward to reading it. Let's talk about two of the other winners. And somebody mentioned in a comment recently last night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo, and I had completely forgotten in all of my slumpiness lately that I had put a hold on the audio of that on Libby, and after it won, I opened the Libby app, and somehow the audiobook is in there. It's available for me right now, and there are only 2 days left on my hold, and I can't extend my hold because there are other people waiting for it. So that timing is not great. And I can't believe I missed that somehow in all my reading slumpiness that I've been going through. So that is a book I am absolutely looking to read, since the audio is about to expire and I'll have to get back on the hold list because I started a different audiobook. So I don't think I'll be able to get to Last Night at the Telegraph Club before it expires. I'm probably going to look to order a copy because Malinda Lo, by the way, gave a great speech at the end of it. She talked about the importance of diversity in books and how when she published her first book, there were only 27 queer books that were published in the young adult market at that time. And now there were hundreds that were produced and published this year alone. And that representation is great, but it is also under threat, and people are clamoring to ban books and hide them away and censor them. So she talked about how important it is to celebrate that diversity, and I want to support that. So I think this is a book I'm probably going to seek out and purchase a copy of. So I need to call Montana Book Company when they open and make sure I can get myself a copy of that, because I think it's going to be fantastic. Just quickly to talk about the citation that they gave it on their site and a little bit of why I think this is such a fascinating book that I would love to read. I've read a fair amount of LGBTQ YA books this year, and they've been good. I haven't read a bad one yet. I'm sure there are bad ones out there, but I haven't read a bad one yet. Here's the citation they gave Last Night at the Telegraph Club. Last Night at the Telegraph Club glows with desire and hums with sensuality as sapphic romance flashes against fear and intolerance. In lustrous detail, Malinda Lo materializes Chinese-American Lily and White Kath's love story during the rise of 1950s McCarthyism. Lo's exquisite prose contrasts Lily's unhurried discovery of her sexuality against Kath's unquestioned belonging at the Telegraph Club. Lo beckons readers sentence by restrained sentence into this incandescent novel of queer possibility. I mean, sign me up. I am so excited for this book. I really want to read it. I might try to get to the audio before the hold expires, but I feel like I want to support the existence of this book by purchasing a copy as well. So I don't know what I'm going to do yet. The description of it that they give is really short, so let's take a look at it. 17-year-old Lily Hu can't remember exactly when the feeling took root. That desire to look, to move closer, to touch. Whenever it started growing, it definitely bloomed the moment she and Kathleen Miller walked under the flashing neon sign of a lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club. Suddenly, everything seemed possible. But America in 1954 is not a safe place for two girls to fall in love, especially not in Chinatown. Red Scare paranoia threatens everyone, including Chinese Americans like Lily. With deportation looming over her father, despite his hard-won citizenship, Lily and Kath risk everything to let their love see the light of day. Again, sign me up for this book. So excited for it. So excited. Can't wait. And I want to talk about the nonfiction winner, which is All That She Carried, The Journey of Ashley's Sack, A Black Family Keepsake by Tiya Miles. Tiya had a great speech. She talked about the importance of voting and getting booster shots. And the book sounds really interesting. The citation they gave it is, a brilliant original work. All That She Carried presents a Black woman's counter-compilation of lives that ordinary archives suppress. Tiya Miles' graceful prose gives us narrative history, social history, and object history of women's craft through the things Rose gave the daughter she was losing forever. With depth and breadth, Miles offers the visual record of love in the face of the child trafficking atrocities of slavery. This book is scholarship at its best and most heartrending. And I'm not going to do the whole description of it because they have a really long description, but just the first part of it. In 1850s South Carolina, an enslaved woman named Rose faces a crisis, the imminent sale of her daughter, Ashley. Thinking quickly, she packed a cotton bag with a few precious items as a token of love and to try to ensure Ashley's survival. Soon after, the 9-year-old girl was separated from her mother and sold. Decades later, Ashley's granddaughter Ruth embroidered this family history on the bag in spare yet haunting language, including Rose's wish that it be filled with my love always. Ruth's own words, the reason we remember Ashley's sack today, evoke a sweeping family history of loss and love passed down through generations. That sounds amazing. And I will not be surprised if we see that pop up on best of lists once they really start coming out, because that just sounds fantastic. So I'm gonna have to be looking for a copy of that. That is probably something that I would do on audio. So I will probably be looking for a copy on Libby or Scribd and seek it out that way. I don't know if it's available on either of those sites. If not, maybe the library in 2022, but it sounds absolutely amazing. So all in all, I think this is a good year for the National Book Award. I am not going to really talk about the winner for translated literature because I'm not familiar with a lot of the books that were in there, and I'm not going to talk about poetry because that is my weak spot as a reader, and I don't feel super qualified to say anything about the books that were up for it and the book that won. But I would love to hear what you think. I'm excited for Hell of a Book, even though I haven't read it, because I've just heard so many good things about it. And I think it was a really great long list and a great short list. You can quibble with some of the books and some of the representation, but I think all in all, this was a good year for the National Book Foundation, and I'm excited for the winner. I'm excited to get to last night. I'm really excited for last night at the Telegraph Club. I don't know if you can tell, really excited for that. And I'm also excited for All That She Carried because they just sound really fantastic. And one reason I really love following book awards is this sense of discovery. I hadn't paid attention to the nonfiction list, so the fact that I caught a part of Tiya Miles' speech is really what made me look at that book more closely, and it sounds absolutely fascinating, so I can't wait to get to it. But I'd love to hear what you thought. If you think what you think about the long list, the short list, if you would swap any of the books out for a different book, maybe a book by a woman, let me know in the comment section down below. If you're happy about this, shout it out down below. If you're mad on behalf of one of the other books, let me know that as well. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading. I'm going back to coffee.